We will now give room to our guest who will be joining us from Washington, Laura Rawlings, Head of Strategy and Results in Social Protection of Labor from the World Bank. And she will also be taking part in the panel discussion.
Hello, this is Laura Rawlings. We have had some problems with the internet connection, so I'm going to hope that this works well. And please let me know, and I will depend on my friend Victor to send me a text message if things are not working. But thank you very much for inviting us to join in your conference. And I wanted to share with you today some information. We'll put up a PowerPoint in a moment from our new social protection and labor strategy that the World Bank has developed to guide our work in social protection over the next 10 years. And moving, the title of our strategy is called Resilience, Equity, and Opportunity. And if we go to the second slide on core messages, I just want to outline what the main messages are within this strategy, which is available to all of you on the website listed at the very end of the PowerPoint. But the three messages that I think will resonate with this audience and this conference are, first of all, that social protection and labor policies and programs are necessary in an increasingly risky and changing world, that they are particularly effective when they take a systems approach, when they are inclusive, when they are responsive to risk and to crises, and when they are productive. In other words, when they foster opportunities. And in order to be effective, what the donor community needs to keep in mind in working with countries is that our approaches need to be tailored to country context and to evidence that's available, need to be knowledge-driven, and need to be developed and applied collaboratively with clients. So the next slide, number 3, gives you a little bit of background on the World Bank social protection and labor practice. We work across the developing world. We provide both financial assistance as well as knowledge, policy advice, technical assistance, and capacity building. And we work in 3 core areas as well as the area of disability, the 3 core areas being social assistance or safety nets, pensions and social insurance, and labor market reforms, including, importantly, youth employment issues. The next slide I won't spend a great deal of time on, except to illustrate that our practice here at the World Bank, and often attention, in fact, to social protection more generally, tends to be counter-cyclical. It rises during times of crisis and wanes during other times. So beginning sort of in the mid-90s with the Asian financial crisis, then there was the crises in Latin America and in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and most recently the global economic crisis characterized by peaks in food and fuel prices has also been a time where our lending has gone up, our engagement has gone up, and indeed global attention to social protection has gone up as well. Moving now to why social protection and labor systems are necessary, we'll move straight to slide 7 with the big circle in between, saying that social protection and labor programs are indeed necessary in a risky and changing world. And this is something we're all very familiar with and has to do both with structural factors, often linked to demographic change, such as youth bulges in some countries, the growing share of the elderly in others, as well as the commonality of crises today, both economic crises due to greater interdependence, as well as crises driven, for example, by climate change, which can induce drought and the increased frequency and intensity of natural disasters. In the face of this risky and changing world, as the next slide lays out, is really the foundation for how social protection and labor seek to work. And that is on 3 pillars. First, to provide resilience for the vulnerable and to ensure against the impact of different types of shocks, This is often through social insurance mechanisms, such as pensions or unemployment insurance, or informal mechanisms, including savings. It is to provide the second pillar, equity for the poor, and to protect those who are vulnerable against dire poverty and against losses of human capital. So this is often the realm of transfers and of social assistance, and is a very important and traditional component of social assistance, including the area of cash transfers, where most cash transfers fall. And last, but certainly not least, a big emphasis that we have in our strategy, and that I would like to raise for the discussion, is the third leg on opportunity. This sometimes gets forgotten in a discussion around social protection, but is extremely important because it is the side of social protection that looks to promoting human capital development and looks to promoting access to productive work. So we can talk about that a little bit more. The following slide, slide number 9, shows the importance of social protection. It's increasingly recognized that that approaches in social protection aren't just about addressing equity, they're also about laying a foundation for inclusive growth. And this is shown, and there's in fact a background paper that gets into this in much more detail that's also available on our website, but it shows how social protection contributes to sustainable inclusive growth at the household level, the community level, and the national level. At the household level, through fostering an accumulation of assets, through allowing for increases in entrepreneurial activity, and by increasing and preserving human capital. Building up at the community level for creating productive assets, improving the functioning of labor markets, and creating spillover from increased demand for local goods and services. And finally, at the national level, social protection is key to promoting social cohesion, to enabling reform, to stimulating aggregate demand, and is indeed increasingly seen as a key component of countries' development approaches and poverty reduction strategies. So, when are social protection and labor programs most effective? If we move now to slide number 11, I will briefly go through elements that we feel are critical, which are including to be systemic, inclusive, responsive, and productive. Starting with slide 11, social protection and labor programs and policies are most effective when systemic. So on slide 12, you have our definition of social protection and labor systems. That these are, in fact, portfolios of coherent programs that can communicate with one another, that often share administrative subsystems, and work together to deliver the core functions of social protection in terms of resilience, equity, and opportunity. And much of the work that we will be engaging in the future in the World Bank is in fact to try to help countries and to work together with partners to take this more systemic approach to our social protection and labor work. One good lens through which to do this is on slide 13, which I won't spend a lot of time on, but which outlines a view of social protection and labor programs across the life cycle, starting in pregnancy and early childhood, working through childhood and youth and the school years, into the working age population and into old age. And at each of these stages in the life cycle, there are different types of risks and different types of needs in terms of social protection. In the dimensions of opportunity, equity, and resilience. And the table here lists certain types of social protection programs that help address the risks faced at different stages in the life cycle. This is a common and powerful and intuitive framework through which to view a lot of our social protection and labor work. The next slide summarizes a discussion in another background paper that we developed for our strategy, which I co-authored on social protection and labor systems, and speaks about the 3 levels at which we can approach taking a more systematic view. The first being at the administrative level, where there are certain administrative tools, such as common beneficiary registries or targeting systems or payment methods that allow for a stronger foundation, not only to make individual programs more effective, but to allow programs to communicate with one another and share information so that the collection of efforts is better harmonized and better articulated and better able to respond to people's risks. The second level is the program level, which aims at improving the design of existing programs and harmonizing portfolios of programs. And finally, the highest level is the policy level, which aims to ensure overall policy coherence across programs and across levels of government that are consistent with national goals and with social contracts, and with the resources and priorities available in client countries. The need for systems is illustrated in the next slide, where we see a pie chart from a study that the World Bank recently concluded of cash transfer programs in sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see here that the way these programs are administered is often quite fragmented. Many of them are outside of government. Most of them, as a matter of fact. Many of them are through social welfare ministries, as you would expect, but others sit in other types of agencies. There are programs also in social security ministries, labor ministries. The world of social protection is a world that is highly fragmented and still suffers from a great deal of lack of coordination across different ministries and donors who are often implementing similar overlapping programs. And when you look also at the level of beneficiaries, where you have gaps and overlaps. So there's a need to address this fragmentation. The next slide, slide 16, shows sort of a typical situation both in terms of pensions and in terms of social assistance, where you see both large gaps in coverage as well as different levels of generosity, which are often regressive in terms of their coverage and their benefits. Moving on to the next slide, slide 17. Here we have some data from different regions of the world that show the coverage of social protection and labor programs in terms of the percentage of households that receive these types of transfers and participate in these types of programs. And what you can see is that particularly in low-income countries, the vast majority of households do not receive any type of